Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show, coming to you from Washington, D.C. this afternoon. Fireworks on Capitol Hill today, where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made the case that he is the man. I mean, indeed, truly, like the only man to run the Department of Health and Human Services in 2025 America and implement President Donald Trump's Make America Healthy Again agenda. His opponents didn't get it. Even some of the Republicans didn't get it. But for the most part, they did well, the Republican senators. A couple, which I'll go over, were annoying. But the Democrats once again made fools out of themselves. They made fools out of themselves in the same way they keep looking at Trump and saying, Hitler, Nazi, fascist, convicted felon. And everybody's like, screw you. We have a country to save. That's how I felt today watching them go after RFK. They don't get it. That audience was filled with parents, moms, with infants, with little kids with them, trying to send a message to these senators. They're done playing these ridiculous games. Half these senators are on the take with Big Pharma, or Big Ag for that matter, and doing Big Pharma's bidding live in the hearing. They don't want RFK. They don't want somebody who's been suing Big Pharma his entire career. That's who pays their reelection bills. And it was very obvious as you watched them today. They were smearing him. I mean, left and right, those in the press, those who are on the left-hand side of the aisle in this hearing. And, they weren't even trying to hide it, basically. They just wanted to make, if half this stuff had been said outside of the U.S. Senate, they could all be sued for defamation. I mean, it was amazing. Look, I will say this. They didn't go hard personal on him like they did with Pete Hegseth. They could have brought it up. Obviously, Bobby Kennedy is a recovering heroin addict. He said he's been sober for 42 years. They could have brought up the personal behavior with women. It's not exactly stellar on the history there. They steered clear of that, which was good. But they, man, are obsessed with his stance on vaccines. Obsessed. And either unwilling or unable to see what he really feels about them. I mean, look, he's not a huge proponent. I think that's fair. But they just want to paint him as somebody who wants to ban all vaccines. And he doesn't talk about banning at all. He's very against vaccine mandates. And in some cases, he wants more research being done before we push these vaccines on kids, and has joined as a lawyer in some lawsuits against the manufacturers. Look, here's one of the lowlights of the day. It was actually very funny, so I enjoyed the moment. But this is what we said. Instead of talking about what he's going to do to try to get the chemicals out of our food supply, try to work with farmers and ranchers to help them avoid these toxic pesticides in the way that they're using them now and to the measure that they're using them now. Instead of talking about that and exactly how he plans to get all of these ultra-processed foods out of our food supply, or make them just a minor offering as opposed to the dominant thing you see on your shelves and at your school lunches. Instead of spending time on that, the Democrats wanted to talk about baby clothes, like Bernie Sanders, who decided to bring up this onesie, which we're putting on the screen now, put out by RFKJ's nonprofit Children's Health Defense Fund, which he's now had to leave because of this appointment. And Bernie Sanders was really upset that there's a baby onesie that reads unvaxxed and unafraid. Watch this.
Now you're coming before this committee and you say you're pro-vaccine. Just want to ask some questions. And yet your organization is making money selling a child's product to parents for $26, which casts fundamental doubt on the usefulness of vaccines. Can you tell us now that you will, now that you are pro-vaccine, that you're going to have your organization take these products off the market?
Senator, I have no power over that organization. I'm not part of it. I resigned from the board.
Yeah, that was just a few months ago. You founded that. You certainly have power. You can make that call. Are you supportive of this?
I've had nothing to do with leadership.
Are you supportive of these onesies?
I'm supportive of vaccines.
Are you supportive of this clothing, which is militantly anti-vaccine?
I am supportive of vaccines. I will. I want good science, and I want to protect.
But you will not tell the organization you founded not to continue selling that product. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We spent actual time on a baby onesie in today's HHS confirmation hearing. Are you supportive of these onesies? America wants the truth. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I prefer the little footed onesies. Keeps their little tootsies warm when you put them in it. What? This is ridiculous. Meanwhile, guarantee you, those onesies are selling out like wildfire right now on the Children's Health Defense website. By the way, what does it even mean? Unvaxxed, and unafraid. It could be about the COVID vaccine, which actually they were telling us should be given to babies and young people. And it's basically just the parents' way of saying, you know what? I refuse your mandates and I will make my own decisions for my children. Or maybe it is about the full vaccine schedule that they push on us to give our little kids, because there are a lot of parents out there, millions of them, in fact, that think it's too much too soon. Why are we giving the Hep C vaccine to babies, which prevents STDs? Not a lot of babies in need of that. So whatever. He tried to make this into like some federal case against the evil Bobby Kennedy. And you heard Kennedy's response there. Another big moment came when Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, she's a Dem, and I got news for you, madam, okay? Your state is getting redder by the second, so I would tread carefully if I were you. And you know what else? It tends to be that the further west the state is, the more Maha is popular. My California friends who've been voting Democrat, some of them their whole lives, love Maha. And I guarantee you, Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Masto has a lot of them in her state, too. You know, the libs who thought that the right was crazy and was neocon-y and wanted to spy on them, and they weren't much akin to that. They weren't friendly toward it. They like Maha. And this is the face of Maha, so she better watch it. She decided it'd be super fun to frame RFKJ as just a loser stooge for this Trump administration.
You keep citing the Trump administration and you're just going to follow what they say. Is that what you're doing? You're just a rubber stamp for them in this position?
President Trump has asked me to end the chronic disease epidemic and make America healthy again. And I'm
So
in
is
a
that the
unique
only reason
position.
why you're at HHS? Is that the
Excuse
only
me.
reason why then you're at the HHS to address that one issue?
President Trump has asked me because I'm in a unique position to end that. And that is what I'm doing. And if we don't solve that problem, Senator, all of the other disputes we have about who's paying, and whether it's insurance companies, whether it's providers, whether it's HMOs, whether it's patients or families, all of those are moving deck chairs around on the Titanic. This is an existential threat economically to our military, to our health, to our sense of well-being. And it is a priority for President Trump. And that's why he asked me to run the agency. And if I'm privileged to be confirmed, that's exactly what I'll do.
Now, there were some who believed that Cortez Masto could potentially be a yes vote for RFKJ because of the reasons I just stated. I didn't see that today in the room. Doesn't mean she won't eventually do it, but the general wisdom in there was that none of these Dems who might be open to the idea of RFKJ, who was a Democrat 2 minutes ago that they loved, probably none will want to be the deciding vote. So if he loses 4 Republican votes, then he's going to need 1 Dem. And the wisdom is that not Cortez Masto, Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island is like a lifelong friend of RFKJ's. Some thought maybe he could potentially be that vote. They went to law school together. I'm pretty sure they were both in each other's weddings. You wouldn't have known that from today. So he's potentially at least another. He didn't beat up on RFKJ the way the others did. He just used his 5 minutes to go off on the issues in Rhode Island. And I got to be honest, a lot of what he said I actually agreed with. He was going on and on about the nonsense rules that constrict states when it comes to, for example, elder care. And how, you want to, if Granny, kept calling her Granny, like Granny gets sick and you want to take, and like the caregivers of the family who need a break, instead of like providing coverage for a caregiver to come in for a day or 2 so the family can have a break, they insist that Granny go in an ambulance to the hospital. That insurance will pay for, but not not the former, which is stupid, as he kept saying. So I got to say, White House was making some good points. He's a possible on RFKJ, but we don't know. And the two absolute worst in the room were Ron Wyden of Oregon. He's the ranking member, meaning the top Democrat on the committee, and Mark Warner of Virginia, who it's tough to say. I'm going to let you guys be the judge. First, I'll get Michael Knowles' vote. In a bit, we're going to be joined by Link Lauren. He worked on RFKJ's campaign, and he's got a lot of thoughts on all of that. But first, Michael Knowles is here. He's host of the Michael Knowles Show on the Daily Wire. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to this show on YouTube and follow me on Insta, Facebook, and X. We continue to face uncertainty when it comes to the economy, with a perfect storm brewing as Social Security and Medicare hit a breaking point as the largest generation is hitting retirement. A smaller workforce means a smaller tax base. You pair that with our growing national debt and the rising cost of living, and we could have a very big problem on our hands. So what are you doing right now to protect your family for the future? Gold can be a very safe haven in very hard economic times, and Birch Gold makes it easy to diversify a portion of your savings into physical gold. Birch Gold will help you transition an existing IRA or 401k in whole or in part into an IRA in gold, and it won't cost you one penny, not one, out of pocket. Protect your future today. Text MK to 989898 and get your free info kit on gold and a copy of The Ultimate Guide for Gold in the Trump Era with a foreword by Donald Trump Jr. There's no obligation, just information. Birch Gold has earned the trust of countless Americans looking to safeguard their savings. Text my initials, MK, to the number 989898 today. Michael, great to have you. So just like the last time you and I did this after Hegseth, I was in the room. I was seated right behind Cheryl Hines, the wife of RFKJ, who it must have blown Hollywood's mind, for those who didn't know she was married to him, to see her, the star of Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David show, right there. And I was totally struck by the amount of enthusiasm in the crowd for him. He's a rock star. That's like, as much as the people love Pete, they were military guys. They follow the rules. They were told not to clap and not to make sound, and they didn't. The RFKJ Maha crew was like, bring it. They were booing people like Elizabeth Warren. Whenever the hecklers got loud, they were yelling, "We love you, Bobby!" And the woman who was seated couple down from me was awesome. She just kept like, when Bobby got on a roll, she was like, "Tell it!" I'm like, this is so much better with her here. So it was kind of fun. It was kind of fun. Probably not for Bobby Kennedy, but it was fun for people like me too, just to see once again, these Democrats have nothing. They just want to inflame, throw arrows. All of it was about conspiracy theorist and anti-vaccine freak. That's really where they went with it. What were your thoughts?
Well, this is the advantage of having a guy who was a Democrat for his whole life be your nominee, is that his supporters were Democrats for their whole lives, and Democrats are a little bit unruly. And so in this case, that actually redounded to our benefit because they were applauding. I feel really good about Sheldon Whitehouse, and I could be proven wrong on this, but they say that jazz is not the notes that they play, but it's the notes that they don't play. And that's how I felt about Sheldon Whitehouse's line of questioning, so-called, today. What was the one thing he didn't say? He didn't ask RFK a single question. So on the one hand, he was really playing up how people are concerned, Mr. Kennedy, and people are afraid of some things you've said. But then Sheldon Whitehouse filibustered himself. Why? Because he didn't want to make RFK answer any questions. He didn't want to put him in a bad spot. I think Senator Whitehouse was sending a clear message today to the Democrats and to some of the fence-sitting Republicans that he would be a pro-Kennedy vote if it comes down to it. The rest of the crew, I thought, didn't really land much of a punch. You had Ron Wyden, who, to me, sounded a little more like Ron Wynan today. Am I right? He was just complaining the whole time. He didn't really land a blow on him. Elizabeth Warren was funny because she first asked Kennedy, do you promise, once you leave HHS, not to work for the pharmaceutical industry? And he said, yeah, I certainly promise that. They wouldn't hire me. I don't like them. And she said, great, next question. Do you promise not to work against them? And Kennedy basically laughed. He said, hold on, wait, I can't work for them or against them? Can I do anything after I leave HHS? So I don't think that really landed at all. The silliest moment was Tina Smith a Democrat that I didn't even really know about in the Senate.
I think we have this. Is this the SSRI thing?
The SSRI gal.
Stand by. Let me play it, and then you take it on the back end. Here she is.
So do you believe, as you've said, that antidepressants cause school shootings? This should be a simple question.
I don't think anybody can answer that question, and I didn't answer that question. I said it
So
should
your
be
answer
studied.
is...
I said it should be studied along with other potential culprits like
So they may cause...
social media. But I don't know. I would never make, because there's no science on that,
Well,
Senator.
there is, Senator. There is, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you for the promotion.
The science shows that there is no link between school shootings and antidepressants. And in fact, most school shooters were not even treated with antidepressants. And of those that were, there was no evidence of association. You know,
I don't think you
my
can
question
say that, Senator, because of HIPAA rules, nobody knows.
The science shows that there's no link between antidepressants and school shooting. Okay, does it? That's an impossibility that they could absolutely rule out that they played any role in any of these. But keep going.
I loved Kennedy's answer, which is, well, what are you talking about? There are HIPAA rules. We can't actually go into the medical files of a lot of these shooters. And there has been an association shown with a number of these school shootings. So this woman went on, and she went on to talk about her own experience with SSRIs. And I thought it really undermined her argument because she was not particularly articulate. She was interrupting him. I thought she sounded downright unhinged. And if her argument was, listen, I've been on powerful psych drugs for a lot of my life, and see, I'm proof that they're all great and there's no question about them. Not the best argument, Senator. So I felt hers really fell flat. No one really landed a blow. The funniest part was at the end when the senators were all itching to get out of the hearing to go vote on a separate matter. And that one senator asked like 5 questions in a row and then said, okay, I got to go. I don't even want to stick around to hear the answer. I thought Kennedy was going to have a lot more trouble when he was first announced as the pick for HHS. But as we said last time on the show, Megyn, Pete Hegseth was obviously the canary in the coal mine. He was one of the controversial nominees. The controversial nominees are Hegseth, Tulsi, Kash Patel, and Bobby Kennedy. They scheduled Pete Hegseth first, then they had a bunch of boring nominees that we all knew would get through, like Marco Rubio, and then they had the rest of the controversial ones scheduled for later. Hegseth sailed through. It was a little tricky, but there was never any real doubt that he was going to make it through. And so I think it's a lot easier for all the other controversial nominees, including Kennedy. If I were Bobby Kennedy, I'd be feeling very good this afternoon.
I would too, but I do have my eye over on Senator Cassidy on the Republican side, who is a question mark. He's a doctor. To hear him question RFKJ, you might think he was a Democrat. He seemed to be laying traps for him. It was all like, what is your plan to do this within Medicare? What is your plan to do that within Medicaid? Explain the difference between this obscure program every layperson has never heard of and this other. And so it seemed to be like a little knowledge test for him. Meanwhile, it's like, that is not why Trump nominated him. Obviously, he will have the help of career bureaucrats over at HHS who can get him up to speed on all these things. He'll learn. But it almost seemed like he was trying to embarrass him or maybe create the case for Republicans that Bobby's not qualified for this job. That was my feeling. I don't know, but we need Cassidy to be a yes, or he needs to be hearing from Elon Musk's super PAC. You've already got Scott Pressler, who got all those Republicans registered in Pennsylvania, saying, I will personally make sure Kennedy suffers electorally, or anybody on the Republican side who doesn't vote for him. And these people mean business. Don Jr.'s got a whole wrangling group of money people who know how to scare these Republican senators. They're not trying to scare the Dems. They're trying to scare the Republicans who are trying to stop Trump from getting his nominees. So if I were Cassidy, I would be careful.
This was Kennedy's one mistake during the series of traps and gotcha questions, is he was asked, do you know how many kids are born on Medicaid in the country? And it's one of these, what's the capital of Uzbekistan kind of questions. And Kennedy didn't know the answer. He said, I don't know what the answer is. And he made the mistake that people sometimes make when they're in a negotiation. In a negotiation, whoever gives the first number loses. And I think it's true here in Senate confirmations. If you don't know the answer, don't give an answer. So he said, 30 million. And the answer was 1.5 million or something like that. So, okay. okay. They showed that he didn't know one statistic. I don't think that's really going to hurt him all that much in the end. I agree some Republicans are a little on the fence. The reason that I would have been on the fence and that conservative Republicans would be on the fence is because Bobby Kennedy has been in favor of abortion for his whole career. That was what really worried me. And I know a lot of pro-lifers as well. And Kennedy was clear as day here. Kennedy said, I believe that every abortion is a tragedy, and I support President Trump's agenda. To me, it was a little strange that these Democrats kept hammering Kennedy on...
I know.
They said, are you just here to enact Trump's agenda? And Kennedy was nuanced about his answer. But of course, the correct answer is yes. I didn't win the election for president.
And the other thing was a Republican senator asked him, Michael, are you, if we have another like pandemic type thing, are you going to go over and, interfere at the CDC and the NIH and with these doctors who are coming up with, meanwhile, I was like, I certainly hope he's going to. Yes, I hope his answer is yes. That's why we want him there, to make sure we don't have another drunk on his own wine, Dr. Fauci, sending out edicts. Now, if all goes well, we're not going to have that because we're going to have normal heads of these agencies. But I mean, he did say, no, I won't interfere. But like, they're not getting it. They're not understanding. Like some Republicans, Senator Ron Johnson was a star today. He was the star of the whole hearing. He asked all the right questions. In fact, I'll give the audience just a flavor of him after just so many beatdowns by the left. Here's what Ron Johnson did. Stop 12.
Here's somebody from the left, somebody I don't agree with on many issues politically, coming together with President Trump and focusing on an area of agreement, something that the American people desperately want. Finding out the answers. What has caused autism? What is causing chronic illness? Ms. Kennedy, I think I've come to know what's in your heart. I think I know the personal and political price you've paid for this decision. I want to say publicly, I thank you for that. I truly appreciate what you're doing here. Can't we come together as a nation and do this?
That was amazing, Michael. And RFK took that mantle and ran with it repeatedly when given the opportunity to say what he plans to do, which only came from folks on the right. He was absolutely brilliant with it and really sold himself.
I think the American people were persuaded. Whether the Democrats were, certainly they were not. Whether the fence-sitting Republicans were, that remains to be seen. But I suspect they will get in line. But the way some of these senators were speaking about vaccines, about government organizations, about mandates, I thought, have you not been around the last 5 years? Did you not pay attention to what happened in the election? We remember COVID. We remember when Bobby Kennedy was right about the COVID vaccine, and all you people and Dr. Fauci and the CDC, all of you just lied to us. In some cases, you knew that what you were saying was not true or was not based on reliable science, and you just said it anyway. So, sorry, excuse me if I'm willing to favor the views of the supposed conspiracy theorist Bobby Kennedy over the supposed geniuses like Dr. Fauci, because, as Kennedy made clear in this hearing, he was called a conspiracy theorist recently for his views on COVID. He was proven 100% right. So my thought to these squishy Republicans is, vote against Bobby Kennedy if you want, but you're going to have to answer the American people whose views on this matter are perfectly clear.
Okay, we have that soundbite. I'm just trying to look through where it is, where he defends himself on these. I'm a here it is, SOT 17, on whether he's a conspiracy theorist. Watch.
That label was applied to me because I said that the vaccines, the COVID vaccine, didn't prevent transmission and it wouldn't prevent infection, when the government was telling people, Americans, that it would. I was saying that because I was looking at the monkey studies in May of 2020. I was called a conspiracy. Now everybody admits it. I was called a conspiracy theorist because I said red dye caused cancer. And now FDA has acknowledged that and banned it. I was called a conspiracy theorist because I said fluoride lowered IQ. Last week, JAMA published a meta-review of 87 studies saying that there's a direct inverse correlation between IQ loss.
All right, so I'm going to assume
I could go on for about a week.
Is there any one of them that you can say, you got me? That really was a conspiracy theory, or are you in a position?
Not yet. Exactly right. I mean, I feel like that too, virtually all Americans can relate to that, on whether this was a lab leak, COVID, whether it was Russian disinformation in that Hunter Biden laptop. I mean, this is something that's become so commonplace that it's a meme online, right? Like, wait 10 minutes and all my conspiracy theories will be proven true.
That's right. This was a realization I had during COVID, and I was not the only one, that the difference between a conspiracy theory and the truth very often these days is about 6 to 9 months. The fact you just alluded to, Megyn, that the CIA now says, according to reporting from the New York Times, that they have come around to the idea that COVID might have come from a lab leak in China. Gee, really? That's amazing. You, the CIA, the preeminent intelligence agency in the entire world, you, the New York Times, the paper of record, you've just now figured out what everyone with 2 brain cells to rub together knew and said openly 5 years ago, that you all called us conspiracy theorists for saying 5 years ago. That's out. We saw the left overplay their hand on insults like racist and sexist for years and decades even. And now those insults don't really stick anymore. I think the same can be said of conspiracy theorist, which is why Bobby Kennedy took that invective and he ran with it today, and the Democrats were left sputtering.
He was on totally solid ground. Here he is describing what he's doing there, right? I mean, this is, you kind of forget because we cover him as a news item so often, but this is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. His wife is a very successful actress out in Hollywood. He's led a very big life. He's been an extremely successful attorney. And much like President Trump, frankly, much like Pete Hegseth, who was making, according to the disclosures, over $2 million a year at Fox News and is now making about $250,000. This is not for the money. They actually want to get into public service to do some good. So here he was speaking to that in SOT 13.
I don't think anybody is going to be able to do this like I have because of my peculiar experience, because I've litigated against these agencies. When you litigate against them, you get a PhD in corporate capture and how to unravel it. I've written 6 books about these agencies. I know a lot about them and I know how to fix it. And there's nobody who will fix it the way that I do, because I'm not scared of vested interests. I don't care. I'm not here because I want a position or a job. I have a very good life and a happy family. This is something I don't need. I want to do this because we're going to fix it.
So well said, right? He doesn't have to. We should be grateful. They're not even grateful for Elon Musk, these leftists. It's like the most brilliant man on the face of the planet wants to work for us for free. The only correct answer is to say, yes, thank you.
Yes, I love the line he said there. When you litigate against these companies, you get a PhD in corporate capture. And that obviously has happened. I don't know anyone who has any familiarity with Washington who would disagree with Kennedy that major corporate interests have captured a lot of the agencies that are supposed to regulate them. And there's a real irony here for the former Democrats who are sitting there supporting Kennedy, many of whom voted for Donald Trump, is they believed for so many years that Republicans were the party of the establishment and corporate power, rich Uncle Pennybags, and Democrats were the ones speaking truth to power, independence from the outside, man. And in reality, all of those Democrats who were grilling Kennedy today were effectively working on behalf of some of the biggest corporate interests in the country. Even to zoom out a little bit, when President Trump just passed his executive order ordering the agencies to stop transing the kids, to cut out the so-called gender-affirming care for little kids, the people who are arguing against that on behalf of transing the kids are arguing on behalf of Big Pharma, getting little kids hooked on expensive medical treatments that they will have to pay a lot of money for the rest of their lives. So you're right. You did see a fight here just beyond Republican versus Democrat. You saw a fight beyond corporate power, I think very corrupt corporate power in this case, versus independent-minded people who want to make America healthy again. It just so happens that the Dems were on the side of the corporations, and it was the Republicans who were trying to bring some accountability to those corporations.
Yes. Okay. And that brings me to Ron Wyden, who I mentioned at the top, Democrat from Oregon. How much has he taken from pharmaceuticals and healthcare companies? $1.2 million over the course of his career. Didn't happen just yesterday, but still, that's a lot of change in Washington. And here's a taste of how it went between him and RFKJ today, SOT 6.
In your testimony today under oath, you denied that you were anti-vaccine. But during a podcast interview in July of 2023, you said, quote, no vaccine is safe and effective.
Yeah, Senator, as you know, because it's been repeatedly debunked, that statement that I made on the Lex Friedman podcast was a fragment of the statement. He asked me, and anybody who actually goes and looks at that podcast, and we'll see this. He asked me, are there vaccines that are safe and effective? And I said to him, some of the live virus vaccines are. And I said, there are no vaccines that are safe and effective. And I was going to continue for every person. Every medicine has people who are sensitive to them, including vaccines.
Right. So
he interrupted me at that point. I've corrected it many times, including on national TV. You know about this, Senator Wyden. So bringing this up right now is dishonest.
That was very good. And all it needed at the end was that cherry on the sundae about his $1.2 million from Big Pharma, which is why he's so concerned about what Bobby Kennedy has said on vaccines.
And you notice Ron Wyden didn't attempt to correct Kennedy's correction because Wyden did know. Of course he did know. And so to Kennedy's actual point, when he says no vaccine is totally safe and effective for everyone, that is just obviously true, okay? And most Americans agree with that now. To your point at the top of the show, Megyn, the fact that doctors in hospitals try to give newborn babies hepatitis vaccines. I remember we asked when one of my children was born, we said, maybe I guess it was our first kid, we said, why are we giving the kid a hepatitis vaccine? He's probably not going to be sharing needles or going to brothels anytime soon. Why does he need the vaccine? And the insinuation was, all but stated explicitly, because, I don't know, maybe your husband cheated on you, or maybe he's going to cheat on you, or who knows, I don't know, and you think, well, that is so deeply offensive. This is obviously unnecessary. This precious little kid, I don't want to give this kid drugs that he doesn't need when he's 9 pounds or something 2 days after birth. That is the mainstream position now. I think that the Democrats and the squish Republicans have not caught up with the tectonic shift that has happened in politics. They're still considering politics from 10 or 15 years ago. But after this election, issues like mass deportations, that is now the mainstream position of most Americans. Issues like questioning the overprescription of vaccines, the regulatory capture by big pharmaceutical companies, that is now the mainstream position for most Americans. I think that these senators who haven't gotten the message, they're just so profoundly out of touch. And if they continue to remain out of touch, it will be at their own electoral peril.
He wasn't the only one who's been, I believe, is my opinion, compromised by the amount of money they've taken from Big Pharma. Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, is big on the Big Pharma money. She has, let me see, I want to get the number correct. She and Bernie Sanders are the two top senators who received the most pharmaceuticals or health product donations in the 2020 election cycle when they each ran for the Democratic presidential nomination. She received just under $1 million, $822,000. And what did she do when she got her chance to question RFKJ, who spent his whole life suing these big pharma companies for what they've done and suing environmental toxin producers for what they've done to our lakes and our rivers and so on? Here's how that went, SOT 16.
So, Mr. Kennedy, will you also agree that you won't take any compensation from any lawsuits against drug companies while you are secretary and for 4 years afterwards?
Well, I'll certainly commit to that while I'm secretary. But I do want to clarify something because you're making me sound like a shill.
I'm asking about fees from suing drug companies. Will you agree not to do that?
You're asking me to not sue drug companies,
No,
and I'm not going to agree to that,
drug
Senator.
companies as much as you want.
You're asking me, Senator, you're asking me not to sue pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, you are. That's exactly what you're doing.
Kids might die, but Robert Kennedy can keep cashing in.
Senator, I support vaccines. I support the childhood schedule. I will do that. The only thing I want is good science, and that's it.
That was actually, I thought, a very effective exchange on his part, right? Because there is a difference. I understand what she was trying to do. And it's very clear he can't be suing vaccine companies or drug companies while HHS director. That's a no-brainer. She wanted him to say that he wouldn't sue vaccine or drug companies for 4 years after. Why? What is the incentive? Like, that it doesn't make sense to me to put that prohibition on somebody after they've left the office. It's not going on the payroll of any individual plaintiff who might be suing Big Pharma over a vaccine injury. Like, she's saying, yes, he was receiving some payments if he pushed people to this law firm that has a lawsuit now over Gardasil, the HPV vaccine, and showed that he is getting some sort of a kickback or some sort of a payment for that referral. And he's done an ad trying to tell people, if you've been injured, you can go to this law firm. There's nothing inappropriate about that whatsoever. He's been very outspoken about that vaccine and does not believe in it. And there are some people, many, many people actually, who say their child has been hurt by that vaccine. But she tried to turn it into the same thing as like an HHS secretary leaving and taking a job with Pfizer, which would create an incentive while in the job to just give Pfizer a pass for 4 years. It didn't work the other way around.
Certainly not. And Kennedy had her number, and you could tell that Senator Warren's fingers were just itching for the tomahawk when he called her out. She raised her voice. She got a little red in the face. But Kennedy was absolutely right. He seemed almost perplexed when he said, hold on, you're asking if I promise not to work for the drug companies. Okay, I won't. But now you're asking, will I work against the drug companies as the HHS secretary? I'm just going to follow the science. And hold on, now you're asking if after I leave, you, Senator Warren, are clearly just shilling for the big pharmaceutical companies. And so this is the real dynamic at play here. Every nominee is going to be different. Every agency is going to be different. But in this case, it's not Democrats versus Republicans. In this case, it's not even leftists versus conservatives. It's not over some ideological issue. The sole pushback that Kennedy is getting, but it's from a powerful force, is from the pharmaceutical companies operating through the politicians that they have bought off and that they control. That's it. So the question that remains to be seen is, can Bobby Kennedy, with the backing of Donald Trump, who just won a landslide election with the popular vote for the first time for a Republican in 20 years, can he overcome one single lobby in the country, and that is the pharmaceutical lobby? We're about to get a measure of their relative power in the U.S. Senate.
Mm-hmm. You can see why they're scared. All right, going back now to my other least favorite senator out there today, and that is Democrat Mark Warner of Virginia. He was the governor. Now he is a senator, and he was dripping with disdain for Bobby. I mean, you could feel the negative vibration all the way across the room where I was seated. He clearly can't stand him. And by the end of his cross-examination, you really kind of wanted to punch him in the face. Don't punch him in the face, not calling for violence. I'm just saying, like a surge built inside of you of like, this guy is a total asshole. He just felt really disrespectful. You could sense his hatred. He was shaking, by the way. I don't understand these senators who shake when they cross-examine. It's kind of what they do for a living now. But here's a flavor of Mark Warner.
If you are in this position, will you pledge that you will not fire federal employees who work on food safety, work on trying to preventing things like salmonella?
Senator, there's 91,000 employees.
So that I take that as that's a simple yes. And I'm going to take that as a no.
I will commit to not firing anybody who's doing their job.
Based on your opinion, based upon your opinion, or your political agenda, or Mr. Trump's political agenda?
Based upon my opinion.
I guess that means a lot of the folks who've had any type of views on vaccines will be out of work.
What? Like, it's just all these snide comments. I don't even really understand. There was no evidence for that. All these people with vaccines are going to be out of work. It's just I understand you're trying to score points, but get something substantive and write it on the substance. What they kept doing was just these little snide, snarky comments at the end of RFKJ, if they ever even let him answer, Michael.
And I think ineffective snide comments, because what was he really getting at? The question was, will you fire any of the 91,000 employees, these bureaucrats, many, if not most of whom, don't even come into the office anymore since COVID at HHS? And Kennedy said, no, I'll fire people who are bad at their jobs. Did these Democrat senators not pay attention to the election? Donald Trump ran on firing bureaucrats. The American people voted to fire bureaucrats. That is one of the main reasons that we want Bobby Kennedy in this role, that we want all of these agency heads, because these bureaucrats are ineffective. They're costing the government a lot of money. They're working against President Trump, as they did in the first term, and they're undermining what the American people want. So when Kennedy comes out and he says, I'm going to fire people who are bad at their jobs, and then the response, well, is that going to be based on your opinion or your political agenda? Hold on, what's the difference between those? Those are synonymous. Or Trump's agenda? Well, Trump picked me for the job, so I don't. He's three ways of saying the same thing. Will you exercise your judgment, Mr. Kennedy, as the Secretary of HHS to lead the department? Yes.
Got you there.
I think I will. Yeah, I don't know.
Will you work with the president to help enact his agenda? Aha! It really was so ineffective. It was kind of painful to have to sit there through it. He, in particular, was quite painful. I want to ask you a little bit about, Link Lauren's going to come on. We're going to continue the discussion about what happened here. But there is some news of the day that I would love to get to with you. And in particular, I want to ask you about this executive order by Trump on so-called trans surgeries and procedures for minors. Another executive order, another thing of beauty, and this is what he did yesterday in part. Across the country today, medical professionals are maiming and sterilizing a group of impressionable children under the radical and false claim that adults can change a child's sex through a series of irreversible medical interventions. This dangerous trend will be a stain on our nation's history, and it must end. Accordingly, it is the policy of the United States that it will not fund, sponsor, promote, assist, or support the so-called transition, in quotes, of a child from one sex to another, and it will rigorously enforce all laws that prohibit or limit these destructive and life-altering procedures. It calls for a reversal to the absolutely disgusting reliance on and acceptance of guidance from this group WPATH, which is really, PATH should stand for pathology, given the way this group tries to run the trans medical community. It calls for defunding of agencies that provide grants to medical schools and hospitals who are providing these treatments. So it's a threat of federal funding to your institution if you provide these procedures on minors. Calls for the Secretary of HHS to ensure treatments are not covered by federally funded programs such as Medicare and Medicaid. We don't want federal taxpayer money being used to fund for these. Also called to exclude chemical and surgical mutilation of children coverage from other related programs, because it's not just Medicare and Medicaid that wind up getting used for this. And goes on to say the DOJ shall convene states' attorneys general to coordinate the enforcement of laws against genital mutilation across all American states and territory. It goes on. We don't have enough time to go through all of it today. But this is a thing of beauty, and it will literally save lives. What did you make of it?
We're waiting to pop some champagne a little later today over here at the Daily Wire. This has been a hobby horse of ours for some time now. A lot of people probably first even came to be aware of Ben Shapiro when he was calling out the trans ideology on TV, and a trans-identifying man threatened to beat him into a pulp and send him home in an ambulance. My first campus speaking tour, my first or second, it was very early on, was called Men Are Not Women and Other Uncomfortable Truths. At the time, that was uncomfortable to people. Nobody has done more in the country than my colleague Matt Walsh to bring attention to the trans issue with his movie What is a Woman, the rally to end child mutilation. You've seen lawmakers now taking action since then. But this has been a long journey. We're talking about 8 or 10 years that conservatives, and to give credit, also feminists, also people who care about women's rights, also people who just care about the well-being of children, all sorts of people across a broad ideological coalition have said what radical ideologues are doing to little kids, the kind of medical experiments that are ruining their lives based on no kind of science whatsoever. In fact, the largest data set we have on trans procedure outcomes long term shows that not only do they not help, but they actually make anxiety worse. Horrifying kind of medical experimentation, worse than what we did in this country with lobotomies in the 1950s. That is coming to an end. You're seeing that now in the UK, in Sweden, and Finland. This is a cross-civilizational kind of movement to restore a little bit of sanity, and Trump is putting the final hammer down on this. We're not going to mutilate kids because of people's ideological fantasies or sexual fetishes or anything else. That is over at the federal level. Now I want to see that matched at the state and local level. A major, major important victory.
Yeah. I mean, I want to study the order more and talk with some of my lawyer friends about it, but he can't undo a state law that allows this stuff, like these radical leftist states, by executive order. But
he can withhold funding.
He can withhold funding from universities and lower schools and hospitals and private schools, some of which take some federal money. He can withhold money from the institutions that perform or promote these procedures. And that is huge. I mean, that's a real blessing because the almighty dollar is what they actually care about. And let me, I mean, if he actually says we're not going to pay, Medicare funds or Medicaid funds at an institution doing this to children, everyone will stop. Yes. There'll be tons of legal challenges over all of this. Can it be done? Can something that's already been authorized in terms of funding by Congress be revoked by executive order and this kind of threat? And all of that must be fleshed out. But to me, what's important today is the statement, the intention, and the we're not screwing around anymore. This is a scourge that will be looked back on as an infamous, horrific dereliction of morality for decades to come. And President Trump said it stops now.
Yeah, that's right. This is just the cherry on top of what has been an amazing first, 9 days in office.
Yeah.
The wins just keep on coming. Even I was very hopeful about the Trump administration, and he has surpassed even my expectations here. And I think some of that talk early on about acquiring Greenland, about renaming the Gulf of Mexico, about designating the Mexican cartels terrorist organizations, about retaking the Panama Canal, some of this talk about really throwing around America's weight and the power of the White House in ways that we haven't seen explicitly in many years. In many ways, I think that was setting the stage for some of these kinds of issues, for this exact executive order, which is to say, FAFO, okay? Don't think that I'm joking. Don't think I won't do it. The fact that when Colombia rejected those flights of criminal migrants that were going back down to them, and Trump immediately slapped 25% tariffs, economic sanctions, threatened to jump the tariffs to 50% a week later, this is him saying, guys, I'm really not bluffing, okay? And unpredictability is one of Trump's great geopolitical strengths. And he had 7-8 days already to say, guys, please do not test me. I am pleading with you. Don't make me do to you what I am threatening to do. I think if I were an institution receiving federal money that was harming and abusing children in the way that the pro-trans crowd has, I would be very, very cautious.
Yeah, if the morality of it, the immorality of it doesn't make them stop, maybe the threat of losing federal funding will, because that's why they do it, to the point you made earlier. It costs a lot of money to have these procedures, and then they have a patient for life in both the hospital and with Big Pharma. Two other points I just want to make, one question and one point. You mentioned what happened in Colombia. That's one of the things I'm going to be talking about when I sit down tomorrow, just a programming note, with Marco Rubio, our new Secretary of State, in his first long-form interview. So tomorrow, in his first long-form interview, Secretary of State Marco Rubio sits with yours truly, and 100% we are going to be talking about the message that was sent to Colombia and all other nations when it comes to Trump's FAFO policies, because he's the guy who's going to have to be the face of those with most of these nations. So looking forward to that. Then secondly, I can't let you go without asking you about the historic legislation that Donald Trump just signed into law. the Laken Riley Act. Michael, this is like, it's bittersweet, you know? This 22-year-old nursing student with her entire life in front of her was brutalized by this illegal who had no business being here, who had been caught for lesser violations in New York and then put back out on the street to hurt somebody else. They didn't care. New York City, New York State are both sanctuary cities and states. They put him back out on the street. He went down to Georgia and he killed this young, promising, innocent woman. And today, with support, it was bipartisan, you know, by a lot. I mean, we had some 43 Democrats who crossed over. The vast majority still didn't. But still, there was a fair amount of bipartisan support on this. President Trump signed this, his first piece of legislation into law, saying if you arrest somebody, yes, obviously for a major crime, but even for a minor crime, they must be referred to the feds. And that states' attorneys general, have the right, if they're in a state that where federal lack of enforcement of these policies leads to problems within their state, they have the right to sue the feds for not enforcing the law. And that's obviously for down the line when the Trump administration is gone. If there's a Kamala Harris administration and we open the borders back up again and we lean into these sanctuary jurisdictions, it's empowering the red states and the border states to do something about it. God rest her soul. It's never something you would celebrate. It's just her death was not meaningless. It wasn't meaningless. Let me just play you, Michael, her mom reacting today at the signing ceremony.
We also want to thank President Trump for the promises he made to us. He said he would secure our borders and that he would never forget about Laken. And he hasn't. He's a man of his word. We trust that he will fight for the American people. Most importantly, I want to thank our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, because without his sacrifices, Laken's story would have ended on that horrific day that she was taken from us. But because of him, we can continue living knowing that we will see Laken again. There's no amount of change that will ever bring back our precious Laken. Our hope moving forward is that her life saves lives. We're so thankful that her passion for helping others and her legacy for doing good in the name of Jesus Christ will carry on. Thank you.
Allison Phillips, Laken's mom. And when she teared up, President Trump, who was standing behind her, reached out and rubbed her back. Just a small, sweet, kind gesture from a man who made sure that young woman did not die in vain. And an emotional day, Michael, and what a message from President Trump, who ran first and foremost more than anything else on the immigration issue.
That's right, immigration and law and order. And so what a beautiful statement from Laken Riley's mother, and a beautiful act to sign this law. The Democrats had made a deal. They said, look, we are going to keep the border open, and we know that's going to bring some criminals in, but it's going to help us electorally, and it might give us a permanent electoral majority. And yeah, some Americans are going to be murdered, and some Americans are going to be raped, and some Americans are going to be run roughshod over, but you can't make an omelet without cracking some eggs. That was it. That was the calculation that the Democrats made. It's hideous, it's evil, it's deeply immoral. That was their calculation. And Trump today said, no, no more. The best argument against the Laken Riley Act that you could hear, I believe it was Adam Schiff who made it, for these from the Democrats in Congress and in the Senate. They said, we won't vote for this law because we don't want to arrest a dreamer for stealing a tube of toothpaste. Give me a break. First of all, the dreamers are in their mid-40s now. Second of all, no one is stealing a tube of toothpaste, okay? The man who murdered Laken Riley stole hundreds of dollars of merchandise from a Walmart, and they let him off the hook because the Democrats didn't want to enforce immigration law for selfish, partisan reasons.
And there was inappropriate behavior with a minor.
There was also, on a separate incident,
inappropriate.
That's right, they let him off again. And the central political insight here that Trump has that is lost on the Democrats, or the Democrats don't want to acknowledge, is people who habitually commit crimes are going to keep committing crimes. It's actually an insight about human nature, which is why this legislation should be such common sense. If you break into our country illegally, first of all, you should just be deported for that. But even if you won't be deported for that, if you then go on to start committing other crimes, it's going to be a good bet that you're going to keep doing that. One does not commit theft and commit lascivious acts and then just out of the blue for no reason straighten up and fly right. That's not how it works. And so this should have been passed unanimously in the House and Senate. The fact that these Democrats, the many, many Democrats, voted against this is a national disgrace. It's a scandal. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should resign if we had any integrity in our government. At least, though, there is the beginning of a restoration of common sense and dignity in our government.
I have to say, it's like that night before the election, Michael, I showed up in Pittsburgh to speak for Trump, and we didn't know if he was going to win or lose at that point. But I wanted to respond to the allegation that he wouldn't protect women. He had said he would be a protector of women, and his critics on the left rolled their eyes and made fun of him and said it was an absurdity. And one of the names I mentioned that night was Laken Riley. That's who I would be thinking of when I voted for Donald Trump. And I was. And to see her mom there today, who, it's like, my God, your worst nightmare. But his empathy toward her, and I mean, really the empathy is manifested in the language of that now law that he signed in his first act. And then when it was all said and done, after she spoke and they hugged, he gave her the pen that, I was like, kind of emotional thinking about it. He gave her the pen that he signed that bill into law with. And that's what she has now. She has that instead of her daughter. It's meaningful, but it's not enough. And what really needs to happen is the Democrats who put these policies into place, and they are still in place in many cities and states, like the one I grew up in, New York, that they need to be punished. They need to be removed from power. And this can never be allowed to happen again. I'll give you the last word.
Exactly right, Megyn. And part of the reason that Trump can do this is because he received a mandate from the American people. Things had spun so far out of control. And there were a lot of people who said, I've never voted Republican before. I've been told Trump is a bad guy. I don't know, is he really going to protect this group or that group or the American interest? And they voted for him on a gamble. And he has proven them right. He has proven himself worthy of their trust. If the man did nothing more in office than he's done in the first 9 days of his second term, frankly, he would still be a successful president. And obviously, he's just getting started. I think he has proved his supporters right. He's proved his naysayers wrong. I can't wait to see what happens next week.
Amen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Megyn. Great to be with you as always.
Wow. The great Michael Knowles. Loved talking to him. Up next, Link Lauren. He worked on RFKJ's presidential campaign, and he will give his perspective on what we saw at today's hearing. Don't go away. Grand Canyon University, a private Christian university in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, believes that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. GCU believes in equal opportunity and that the American dream starts with purpose. By honoring your career calling, you can impact your family, friends, and your community. Change the world for good by putting others before yourself. Whether your pursuit involves a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, GCU's online, on-campus, and hybrid learning environments are designed to help you achieve your unique academic, personal, and professional goals. With over 340 academic programs as of September 2024, GCU meets you where you are and provides a path to help you fulfill your dreams. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Let it flourish. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu. You know how much my family and I love our dogs. Yes, even Strudwick. Last week, what did I say? He's getting better. What did he do? He destroyed my kitchen right after I said that. I'm not saying that anymore, but I love him. I love him. He and Thunder have a great life, but some dogs are not so lucky. And this is why I'm super glad to tell you about Delta Rescue, the largest no-kill, care-for-life animal sanctuary in the world. They have rescued thousands of dogs, plus cats and horses too. They provide all their animals with shelter and safety, and most of all, love. And they've been doing it now for more than 45 years. Delta Rescue relies solely on contributions to stay open, and giving can bring tax benefits to you too. Speak with your estate planner about how you can grow your estate while helping animals in need, and check out the estate planning tab on their website to learn more. We love Thunder and Strudwick, but would like other dogs who need love to find it too. Visit deltarescue.org today to learn more. That's deltarescue.org. We're going to do more now on the RFKJ confirmation hearing today, where I attended in person. It was eye-opening in some unexpected ways. I was very pleased to be seated next to Callie and Casey Means. We love them. They're right at the heart of the Maha movement. And one of the reasons I want him to be confirmed so badly is I have every expectation that those two will be very involved in whatever projects he pursues there. I mean, Callie is a whistleblower from inside of the corrosive big food industry who saw the light, exited, and then has been jumping up and down about the toxins that are being put in our food supply ever since. And Dr. Casey Means wrote Good Energy. She's been on the show numerous times. She's brilliant, Stanford-trained doctor, was a surgeon at Stanford post-finishing her residency, or Oregon, I can't remember. Anyway, the point is Stanford. And she walked away from a very lucrative career as a surgeon because she was sick and tired of seeing what big medicine was doing to us. The incentive to keep us sick, to never solve anything. So those two were there front and center, right behind the Kennedy family, many of whom sat right behind their dad, their husband, their cousin. As you know, it's a big family, and it's not without its losers. We'll get to that. Joining me now to discuss it, our friend Link Lauren, who is a former senior advisor to RFKJ during his presidential campaign. Link, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Megyn. Great to be here.
All right, so what was your take on what we witnessed this morning?
I thought that went amazing for Bobby, but it was an utter calamity for most of those Senate Democrats. I mean, Elizabeth Warren can't figure out what nationality she is, but she's screeching about Big Pharma. Bernie Sanders was pointing to the onesies. That was an utter calamity as well. I think these senators should spend less time talking to lobbyists and donors, more time talking to their constituents, because their constituents will tell them they're on board with the Maha movement. We have a chronic disease crisis in this country, and they're behind Bobby, whether he's perfect or not.
Exactly right. It was amazing when I think we have this actually, when he left the hearing room at the end of the day, they broke out into cheers, not the senators, the spectators who were in the audience. Here it is.
This hearing will be adjourned. I still encourage the audience to be polite and respectful no matter what side of the issues you may be on. And Mr. Kennedy, I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're adjourned.
You just don't see that every day where, like, he's the head of a movement, Link. That's what they don't seem to be getting.
No, and I mean, I got to witness it firsthand. I saw him get up every single day and be that warrior on the front lines of the chronic disease epidemic in our country. I mean, Kamala Harris, during her 107-day campaign, she didn't even mention the chronic disease crisis. She had nothing to say about it. I watched Bobby Kennedy get up, go out there and talk to the people about the issues that mattered to them. The fact that kids in this country are sicker than they've ever been before. So these senators, the mainstream media, some of his family members, they want to go to these smear campaigns. That's not what affects people. What affects them is a sick child and trying to get answers.
Yes. And as I said, there were moms in the audience with their children today trying to send a message to these senators that they mean business. Like these mama bears, I think, are so largely responsible for this even happening, right? For Maha, for RFKJ getting elevated, in some part for Trump winning. Even if they might not have loved Trump himself, they got to the polls because they believed that he would make good on his promises on Maha. And he's doing that with this appointment. The family members are disgusting, not those who showed up today, but Karoline Kennedy, who's the daughter of JFK, and her son, right? It's her son, Jack Schlossberg. I don't know which one was worse, but let me start with Karoline Kennedy. Karoline Kennedy, I realized your dad was president. Like, okay, good for you. It was a long time ago, but and then you are a big Democrat donor, so they made you ambassador to Australia, which doesn't mean you know anything at all. But she still thinks that people want to hear from her. And I guess in some leftist circles, they do, because she's got the name Kennedy. Okay, he was killed in 1963. It's like, she was cute. She's the little daughter. We had a part of Camelot, which was a lie anyway. But it's like, who is like, gee, I really want to hear from Karoline Kennedy about RFKJ and what he was like 30 years ago. Here she is in a video that is a reenactment of a letter that was mentioned by some Democrats today.
I've known Bobby my whole life. We grew up together. It's no surprise that he keeps birds of prey as pets, because Bobby himself is a predator. I watch his younger brothers and cousins follow him down the path of drug addiction. His basement, his garage, his dorm room were always the center of the action, where drugs were available, and he enjoyed showing off how he put baby chickens and mice in a blender to feed to his hawks. It was often a perverse scene of despair and violence. Bobby was able to pull himself out of illness and disease. I admire the discipline that took and the continuing commitment it requires. But siblings and cousins who Bobby encouraged down the path of substance abuse suffered addiction, illness, and death, while Bobby has gone on to misrepresent, lie, and cheat his way through life.
I mean, just to recap, I admire him, but he caused family members deaths, and he's a liar and a cheat, and also a predator. Well, none of which was actually supported in her little shtick, not to mention the Kennedy family addictions, which had a long history that predates RFK J-Link.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got a big Irish family. There are a bunch of drunks and alcoholics in my family. My mom's been sober for over 30 years. I'm glad she is sober. I've gone with her to get her chips. She got to know Bobby on the campaign. So much of his brand is his grit and authenticity. He was open every single day in every stump speech, in every interview, about how he found God and found sobriety. And he's been sober, I think, since the 70s, at least for 40 or so years. So I thought Karoline Kennedy's video was an absolute joke. She's sitting in some dirty, messy, disorganized office. I wish we could send her back down under to Australia. I would also question the veracity of her claims made in the video. There's this narrative that his family doesn't support him. That is antithetical to what I experienced on the campaign, Megyn. At every single event, he was surrounded by family members. They volunteered, they knocked on doors, they phone banked. If you go to his house in Brentwood, he has family asleep on every sofa, every couch. They're out in the back playing. So this notion that they don't support him is just untrue. And I found it really embarrassing to weaponize his past issues with addiction against him, especially given the other circumstances. I found that to be just a really low blow in a moment of desperation.
The nerve to try to blame the Kennedy family addiction problem on one Kennedy, right? Maybe he did do drugs with or drink with other family members. You know who else did? Your Uncle Teddy, Karoline, who was one of the biggest drunks we've ever seen in public service, to the point where he killed a woman. He killed Mary Jo Kopechne when they drove off a bridge in Chappaquiddick, and as the car was falling to the ground under the water, he left her. He walked away and waited hours before reporting it. So maybe you should talk about addiction problems with a different branch of the family, not to mention her own father's pill popping, which has become so legendary that now it gets talked about like we had an active addict as a president in the White House. But it's all Bobby Kennedy's fault for introducing people to or doing drugs with some other family members. Now she wants to blame it all on him. I mean, Link, it totally undermined her credibility. And like she tried to comment it as like, I have a very close family. I love my family. I'm very sorry to tell you he's a predator and a drunk and got everyone drunk and addicted, and then they died because of him.
Yeah, I could think of several family members I wouldn't want to sponsor anybody. I don't think they are, 12-step success stories. And I'm only speaking for myself. I don't want Bobby to call and yell at me, which he is not shy to do. But Karoline Kennedy, the timing was just way too convenient for me, but it was like crack for Democrats and MSNBC last night. They were eating up that video. My woke liberal friends in New York were sending it to me going, good for her, you go girl. And I'm like, you need to get out and touch grass. Okay, this is a joke.
Right. Okay, but now can you speak to, as somebody who knows him well, the baby chickens and the mice in the blender led to a perverse scene of despair and violence. That's what she accused him of housing in some basement where baby chickens were being sacrificed. It's not funny. Forgive me, Pete. I'm not laughing at the baby chickens. It's just I'm laughing at the desperation and the attempt to take him down. Perverse scene of despair and violence by this predator who lies and cheats. But I love him. And he kills my relatives, but I love him.
I don't think we're winning any awards from PETA, Megyn, so I think we're safe. She had no evidence to back up her claims. And I know I'm sort of part journalist, part operative, part influencer, but the journalist in me is like, if you're going to make these claims and call someone a predator on video, one of your family members, why don't you have any evidence to back it up? And when she talked about him collecting birds of prey, I think what she's referring to is he loves to go falconing. He's been falconing for years and decades. He's taken disadvantaged people out falconing, handicapped people out falconing for charity. We had many falconing events on our campaign where people got to go out in nature and experience that with him. We did a falconing event with Donald Trump Jr. All the pictures are online. It was a huge success. So this notion that he collects birds of prey, let's give the actual backstory that he likes to go out in nature and play with these falcons, which he's been doing for decades, and all the pictures are online.
I kind of want to know more. Were they live mice, live baby chickens? Because I understand, we all eat adult chickens many times a week. It's not nice, but we do it because we're at the top of the food chain. The mice, it's sad, but you can go to Petco right now and buy a bunch of live mice to feed to your pet snake or your pet whatever. It's it's a thing. The baby chickens, I don't know, that's weird. But I kind of want to know more. I'm glad it didn't come up today, but don't try that at home.
I thought today there were so many things that could have been brought up. I was like, yes, we got through that.
Me too.
A million other things that could have been brought up, Megyn. And I used to keep a list on the campaign of every horrible thing that could be brought up in interviews. So when we did little media trainings or we'd do some interview prep when he was going to go on TV, I would keep my running list. They didn't touch on any of that. And like I said, though, most Americans, they don't expect perfection from their elected officials. They love Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth, RFK. They just want someone who will fight for them. So these smear campaigns, they haven't worked thus far. The guy's still standing.
Yeah. All right. So the apple didn't fall far from the tree because her son, Jack Schlossberg, posted a video about a week ago, which is really despicable. It appears to be making fun of Bobby's speech issue, his vocal cord issue. Here it is.
Hey, everybody. I'm trying to figure out the right present to get Donald Trump for the inauguration. So I found a really rare animal and killed it, and I'm going to give it to him.
How many leftists absolutely laid into Donald Trump in 15-16 because on the campaign trail, they accused him of mocking a reporter's disability, which Trump denied he was doing. Not a peep. There were so many likes on this video. It was no Republican liking that shit.
Right.
Who would do that to a family member?
I found that absolutely disgusting. To come out and attack your family publicly is just embarrassing. It feels very reality show Kardashian to me. It's not something I will ever support. And Jack Schlossberg, I've never met him. I can only speak from what I see. I'm not a big fan. I thought that video was gross. You can discuss, what people believe in. You can discuss, the merits of their work, and you can discuss, Bobby's policies. But to attack him for having spasmodic dysphonia was a really low blow and really just made Jack look bad to me. I also have to point out Kerry Kennedy and other members of the family have the same condition. So I don't think they probably felt good watching that too.
Right. It's like you want to, I just feel like his deceased grandfather would be shocked, would be horrified. And by the way, Karoline Kennedy was like, I don't try to speak for my father or my uncle, but they would both think he's a disgrace. So now she wants us to know she's vouching for the fact that Bobby's father would find his own son, who's just an uncle to her, absolutely disgraceful. Oh, but she never speaks for him, nor her own father, who also would hate RFKJ.
Absolutely. They kind of push this narrative that Bobby's dined out on his last name. No, he hasn't. He's not even that wealthy, as we've seen in the financial disclosures. He's not dining out on his last name, and he's also the patriarch of the Kennedy family. I think a lot of the other ones who had postings in the Biden administration, you could argue they've been dining out and currying favor based on their last name. Jack Schlossberg, I don't know if he works. He seems to have a lot of free time. I wish I had that much free time in my day to sit around making videos, making fun of people and firing off 5,000 tweets, but I don't. So maybe go find some employment and find a job.
Yeah, he's been in the news a lot this past year, and none of it has been good. Then there's this. This is so Kennedy. And I'm talking about modern day Kennedy. We weren't around when the true alleged Camelot was around, but that was no Camelot either. JFK was banging everything with legs. I mean, it was like absolutely no loyalty or faithfulness to his wife, including the White House intern
Sounds
who
like
was
a good
16.
time to me. Okay.
I'm just like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
We were sold a bag of goods because they were Democrats. They weren't doing that to the Republicans. Those people were getting impeached thanks to Woodward and Bernstein. But Maria Shriver weighs in now on the Caroline Kennedy video.
Yes.
Just to, like, we're such good people. Oh my God, we're so good. We Kennedys, we're so strong, and we always do the right thing, except for him. He's the black sheep. She, on X, posted in response to Caroline's video, courage is when you do something hard, heartbreaking, and painful, and you do it anyway. Love you, Caroline. Always have, always will. Okay, so this is superfluous wording. She said the same thing twice. But in any event, this is so Kennedy, right? Like, I'm digging the dagger into my loved one at his moment of need, like the most important moment of his life. I'm trying my best to absolutely humiliate him and kill his chances. And I'm noble. Just in case you didn't know how noble I am and how noble our family is, here I am, Maria Shriver, to tell you that.
No, absolutely. I thought it was really funny to give her a profiles in courage. Like I said, she's sitting in a messy, disorganized room reading a written statement, the day before Bobby's confirmation hearing. I think it just seems so obvious to all of us who are living in reality. But if you're in that liberal mainstream media echo chamber, you're eating all of that up. You want Bobby to go down so hard. So they're just grabbing onto anything, Megyn.
Okay. I guess Schlossberg, the guy, this is again JFK's grandson, Caroline's son, Apple Tree, posted this today. We have it cut. He's decided he really does like making fun of family members and others. No? Oh, it's a tweet? Okay. It's a post, okay. Which is responding to Nicole Shanahan. In fact, let me set it up. Here's what Nicole Shanahan
said she was hot.
posted. And then here's his response. Here's Nicole Shanahan warning the senators who are beating up on RFKJ today.
In 2020, I cut large checks to Chuck Schumer to help Democrats flip 2 Senate seats in Georgia from red to blue. The 2 candidates I helped elect, Senator Raphael Warnock and Senator John Ossoff. Please know I will be watching your votes very closely. I will make it my personal mission that you lose your seats in the Senate if you vote against the future health of America's children. And more than that, I also want to say to Senators Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Bill Cassidy, Tom Tillis, James Lankford, Cory Booker, John Fetterman, Bernie Sanders, and Catherine Cortez Masto, this is a bipartisan message, and it comes directly from me. While Bobby may be willing to play nice, I won't. If you vote against him, I will personally fund challengers to primary you in your next election, and I will enlist hundreds of thousands to join me. You're either on the side of transparency and accountability, or you are standing in the way. The choice is yours. Please choose wisely.
Right on, Nicole. So his response was, she's literally so hot. Who knew? Cannot imagine a senator being intimidated by this bird. That is the perfect tweet. That is leftism in a nutshell, right? Like, if Tucker Carlson ever remarked on how hot Nicole Shanahan is, he'd be getting called a sexist pig by everyone over on Jack Schlossberg's side of the aisle. So he puts it in there, why? To diminish her. He's actually using it to diminish her down to her appearance, as we see with the follow-up line, which shows he is not her fan. Cannot imagine a senator being intimidated by this bird, like this little breakable, sad, weak little thing who's scary to no one, right? So it's like, try to knock her down by reducing her just to her looks, then insult her as a weakling who no one is afraid of. This is the party that is pro-woman, right? Not Trump, not RFKJ, because he flew the coop to stay on the bird motif. It's perfectly on brand.
Absolutely. But this is what being a Democrat is about. If you look at Jack Schlossberg, he got to go on stage and speak at the DNC. Bill Clinton, he's been terrible. He's the patriarch of that party. He got to speak at the DNC. Kamala Harris, she's a disaster. She got to be the candidate. So the Democrats, it's always the rules for thee, not for me. Yeah, Doug Emhoff as well. It's the rules for thee, not for me. So if a Republican went out there and said someone was hot or sexy, like you said, they would be called a sexist pig. But Nicole Shanahan, she's a much more formidable force than I think people realize. I was one of the first people who got to meet her on the campaign. I was on the VP committee, which I was grateful to be a part of. And Nicole's a very formidable person. I think she's been written off, but she has a lot in store for the future.
So this also happened on The View today, where Joy Behar referred to the new press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, who did an amazing job this week. She's green and she's young, but she's very strong, and she's going to get even better. This is why she thinks Trump chose her. Listen.
I think she's probably been put in there because, according to Donald Trump, she's a 10. You know that's what it is.
I want to be clear, though.
So that's why he chose Karoline Leavitt, according to the tolerant left, because of her looks. And I posted this out online. It's an attempt to diminish her.
Right.
She's nothing more than a pretty face. She can't be taken seriously. But I think you made this point on my show, like, let's face it, we really are making America hot again. Like this. Right.
I said we're about
Trump
to have the hottest cabinet.
And let's face it, Republicans in general these days, like that New York Magazine cover, I don't know. I just feel like Republicans are all about these days making an effort, pulling yourself together, presenting yourself well. There is an unusual percentage of good-looking people who support Donald Trump. I don't know what it is. And then on the left, you have these lunatics shaving their heads, wearing their blue bracelets, having their enormous reading glasses everywhere. Like, it's not a good look. It's not something young people are going to want to be associated with. And back to the original point, Joy Behar would be ripping on Jesse Waters if he said the only reason Joe Biden selected somebody was because she was a 10, though I can't think of anybody in his cabinet who'd come to... Anyway, whatever. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, like I said before, we're about to have the hottest cabinet in American history. It is shaping up right now. MAHA stands for Make America Hot Again, just between me and my friends. So that's what's coming down the pike. And I'm sorry, the Republican Party is kind of the big tent cool party right now. New York Magazine can kind of do their fancy footwork and try to denigrate them. But the Republican Party is the cool kids table right now. And you played that clip from The View where they're talking about Karoline Leavitt's looks and she was hired because she's a 10 to Donald Trump. I can tell you nobody on The View was hired for their looks, so we can check that off right there. But
it's jealousy.
It's jealousy. There is a double standard there that if you're a Republican and you speak on a woman's looks, then somehow you're sexist. But Democrats can do it all day long and they get a pass and they're praised and they get to fail upward.
All right. Now back to the hearing. I want to ask you a question. So we cannot afford to lose 4 senators, and 4 Republicans, unless a Democrat crosses over. But we're not sure if there are any such Democrats willing to cross over. They should, because as we saw, a lot of these swing states where these Democrats come from voted for Trump. They voted for Trump. So it's not – now, Rhode Island is not one of them, though. Rhode Island is blue. It's very blue. But Sheldon Whitehouse, a Democrat, who just really did a soliloquy during his questioning, which I said actually some of it made a lot of sense in terms of like what's happening to our grannies and elder care. So it was kind of a safe place to go because it wasn't about how bad Trump is or Republicans are or RFK Jr has been. It really wasn't, though there was a tinge of it. So, but there's a lot of questioning about whether he could be a Dem to cross over, even though he's in a blue state, because they went to law school together. I think they were in each other's weddings. I think there are other, like a long, long friendship between the two of them. Not sure if it's still in existence. It certainly didn't sound like it, given the way Sheldon Whitehouse signed off his little soliloquy today. We have a little bit of a cut. I'm going to ask you about him, and then I'm going to ask you about the Republican, Senator Cassidy, who people are worried about. So they're hoping for Whitehouse to cross, and they're hoping that Cassidy will not fall down and go with the RFK Jr haters. First, here's the Democrat from Rhode Island, Sheldon Whitehouse.
Mr. Kennedy, I only have 5 minutes with you, and I've got a lot of experience with CMS, so you're just going to have to listen. 2 things. One, if you want to move from advocacy to public responsibility, Americans are going to need to hear a clear and trustworthy recantation of what you have said on vaccinations, and making indisputably clear that you support mandatory vaccinations against diseases where that will keep people safe. You're in that hole pretty deep. We've just had a measles case in Rhode Island. the first since 2013. And frankly, you frighten people. I've said a lot. My time is out. You're welcome to respond in writing.
He didn't give him the chance to say one thing in response. But how do you like RFKJ's chances with Senator Whitehouse?
I'm really not sure. I'm really down the middle on a lot of this. I thought Senator Whitehouse was entertaining when he was going, Granny's in the car, Granny's in the kitchen, then Granny's here. I'm like, where is Granny? What's going on with this? So I don't know. I'm hoping that the Republicans will file rank and get it together. Trump won the landslide, Trump won this election in a landslide. He won the popular vote, the Electoral College, the House, the Senate. He should be able to have the cabinet he wants. The same way Joe Biden got to have everybody he wanted. He had Pete Buttigieg as Secretary of Transportation, and the only qualifications he had were fixing potholes in South Bend, Indiana, and he was an utter calamity. So I think if Joe Biden got to have his cabinet, the Republicans need to get it together for Donald Trump. And you can also look at the other health officials we had the last 4 years. Rachel Levine, who's pretty much an overweight man in a dress, has been dictating health policy. Why don't we have someone who actually knows about the chronic disease epidemic in this country?
Thank you. I honestly, these Democrats got behind Rachel Levine and celebrated his elevation to being the alleged first female, whatever the role was. I don't have the exact title. It's not a female. It's a man. It's a man who lived his whole life as a man, went to med school as a man, practiced as a man, raised a family as a man. And I think at 53 decided he was going to start masquerading as a woman after a lifetime of being a man and having some of the advantages that come with that, especially during the time he grew up, when it comes to getting into med school and so on. But then actually wanted us to celebrate him as the first female this and the first female that, as though he had climbed any of the same hills we had. Fuck off, sir, and take off that ridiculous dress. That they all loved him. Rachel Levine's like the face of HHS under Joe Biden. But Robert Kennedy, he's too much of a kook, Link. We can't vote for that.
Absolutely. The Democrats the last 4 years under Joe Biden had no problem with an overweight man in a dress dictating health policy. But they have an issue with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's been on the front lines of these issues for years. And I wish they would just come clean and admit it. 90% of our healthcare costs in this country go toward chronic disease. That is $4 trillion a year. This is an embarrassment for the United States, the most prosperous nation on earth. We've got the sickest people on earth. This isn't okay. And if we've been trying it one way and it's been an absolute disaster, God forbid we try something new and give Robert F. Kennedy Jr. a chance.
Okay, I do want to show you the Republican. Senator Cassidy, who's a doctor, was very forensic in his approach. There was no warmth whatsoever emanating off of him. And I was not able to read him. If I had to put him down right now as yes or no, I'd say he's leaning no, just given how cold he seemed toward Bobby. But I don't know anything about him, to be perfectly honest. So here he is.
What will you do about dual eligibles?
About
Dual eligibles.
Well, dual eligibles are not right now served very well under the system. Those are people who are eligible for both Medicaid and Medicare. I suppose my answer to that is to make sure that the programs are consolidated, that they're integrated.
How do you propose that we integrate those programs? Does Medicare pay more, Medicare pay less, Medicaid pay more, Medicaid pay less? How do we do that?
Well, I'm not exactly sure because I'm not in there.
What thoughts do you have regarding Medicaid reform?
Well, Medicaid is not working for Americans, and it's specifically not working for the target population. Most Americans, like myself, I'm on Medicare Advantage, and I'm very happy with it. Most people who are on Medicaid are not happy. The premiums are too high. The deductibles are too high.
So I realized that was a very boring clip, but I cut it that way so that the audience could see what he was doing to him. And, you know, he's not actually going to be directly atop of Medicare. That's going to be Dr. Oz if he gets confirmed. He's going to be running Medicare. But they thought it was fair game, right, because it's under NIH.
Right.
And I think that Senator Cassidy was already well aware that Bobby Kennedy was going to have difficulty answering those questions. It's not something he's talked about in the campaign trail. It's not really part of his mission. Of course, he'll have somebody there who can oversee this, but the senator knew all that. So I think he was trying to embarrass him, while not looking like a complete prick, right? Looking like he was staying on topic, which does not give me a lot of hope. And I don't think McConnell's going to vote for Kennedy. And I don't have high hopes after Hegseth of Collins and Murkowski. And if that calculation is true, that's 4 down, which kills the nomination. So he would need a Dem. And now we're on shaky ground. That's my own back of the envelope math there, Link. I don't know what you're hearing.
So I'm definitely listening to what you're hearing and I'm agreeing with you, but I want to be careful not to criticize Senator Cassidy too much because I'm hoping we can win him over in the next few days. And if there's one thing I know about Bobby, he is willing to listen and work with anybody. Our campaign was a cornucopia of very different voices. We had people who were pro-life, pro-choice. We had these debates openly. We talked about what should we do with the border? What should we do with this? Doesn't matter if you're, a lifelong person who's been in politics. Bobby Kennedy will listen to you, sit down with you, and hear what you have to say and work with you in good faith. So I hope Senator Cassidy votes yes on Robert Kennedy Jr.'s confirmation because I think he will be able to work with him. But like you said, I think he was trying to ask about Medicare and Medicaid and all of these things. But the overarching theme of the day for me watching the confirmation hearings, Megyn, and you'll have to tell me if you agree, they've been around in D.C. for decades. Some of these people have been in the Senate a very long time. So they're interrogating Bobby Kennedy. What are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about that? You guys are the ones who've been around for decades overseeing the chronic disease epidemic. It's like when Trump was debating Kamala Harris and Kamala Harris said, when I get into office on day 1, I'm going to secure the border. Sweetheart, you've been there 4 years. You went down to the border for 20 minutes. So shoulda, coulda, woulda, I think with a lot of these senators.
You're in office now, Kamala. Yeah, I mean, that's the crazy thing is we're coming off of 4 years of Democrat rule. The Democrats had control of HHS and the White House.
Right.
Like, what? I love, these are the problems by the Democrats. Sheldon Whitehouse's whole bid on how bad it is for Granny. The Democrats have been in power. Why didn't anything happen? But now he's disgusted at, nobody works with me. It's like, well, you know what? This is a lifelong friend. If you would treat him nicely, maybe he would work with you. Even if you don't treat him nicely, he's probably going to work with you. Here was RFKJ kind of speaking to the point of he's been a Democrat his entire life.
Right.
But there's a fair amount of TDS, obviously, in politics and certainly in that hearing room today that was coloring the way people were coming for him. It's SOT 19.
And all these Democrats are opposed to me for partisan issues. They used to be my friends, agreed with me on all the environmental issues that I've been working on for my whole career. Now they're against me because anything that President Trump does, any decision he makes, has to be lampooned, derided, discredited, marginalized, vilified.
It was a great answer. And my favorite part, though, Link, after the onesie, make onesies great again. That was my favorite part of the whole hearing when Bernie's like, do you favor this onesie? Will you promise to get this onesie? Like, who cares, Senator?
I think he was just mad they didn't make them in adult sizes. I think Bernie wanted them and they just didn't come in adult sizes. That was the problem.
Mittens. With his little mittens. But this moment was my absolute favorite one of the day, SOT 5.
I don't want to take food away from anybody. If you like a cheeseburger, a McDonald's cheeseburger, a Diet Coke, which my boss loves, and you should be able to get them. If you want to eat Hostess Twinkies, you should be able to do that. But you should know what the impacts are on your family and on your health.
Perfect. Pitch perfect, both in its messaging and his humor and the call out to Trump.
Absolutely. And if there's one thing I know about Bobby, he doesn't want to take anything away from people. He said, I'm not going to take away vaccines. I think some of the senators overlooked that conveniently when they were interrogating him today. He said he doesn't want to take away vaccines. He respects the Dobbs decision. He's a lifelong attorney. He respects the Supreme Court. He has said he has no intention of doing anything to reverse Dobbs, to undermine Trump's views on abortion over the next 4 years at HHS. But they just want to overlook these things to have some political theater, to have a moment. I thought one of the best comments he made was how there aren't any Republican or Democrat children in this country. There are American children who are sicker than ever before. It's an embarrassment that more kids than ever have asthma, childhood diabetes, and all these other issues. And nobody the last 4 years under Biden has wanted to discuss that. And I understand there are a lot of perverse incentives in Washington, D.C., a lot of lobbying. The pharmaceutical lobby is very strong, especially with some of the senators who are up there today. But it's time to make America healthy again. Otherwise, I don't know what happens to us if we continue down this path for more years.
Yeah. He was talking about how the people in Japan still have a 3% obesity rate. They haven't gone up exponentially like we have in the United States with all of our processed food and the way we eat. And Kennedy's been talking a long time about the rise in autism, the rise in ticks, the rise in allergies. Why are we seeing it? And his theory is it's because we are swimming in a sea of toxins every day in our food supply, in our water supply, in the air we breathe, in the furniture we sit on, everywhere. And it's time we get really honest about what those things are and whether we can eliminate them from our daily diet. And I use the term diet to encompass all of that, not just the food that we take in. It would be so encouraging, uplifting, give me something to feel good about in all of us, to have somebody at the top of HHS who's even thinking about that stuff, Link, who's identified that stuff as a problem, and instead of just shoulder shrugging because it's going to upset Big Pharma or Big Ag or what, it is actually going to try to do something about it. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, like I said, God forbid we try something different the next few years to see if we can make Americans just a little bit healthier. Like I said, I've seen Bobby Kennedy firsthand get up every single day and be that warrior on the front lines of the chronic disease epidemic. He's really been the canary in the coal mine. He can't be blackmailed. He can't be bought off. He's certainly not doing this to enrich himself in any way, shape, or form. This is a sacrifice he's making for the American people because he gets up every day and he really does pray, what can I do to make Americans healthier?
Wow. All right. Well, we'll continue to follow it, and we should know more over the coming days about how the votes on that committee are settling. And don't forget, Link, thank you. Tomorrow, our exclusive interview with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. This is his very first long-form interview since becoming Secretary of State. It's days before he jets off for his first foreign trip to Panama. That's interesting, right, given what Trump has been saying. We're going to ask him about Trump's standoff with Colombia, in which Colombia caved in about 40 minutes. We'll ask him about what's next in the Middle East, what's next in Ukraine. I mean, talk about having a lot on your plate. Under Trump, the Secretary of State has a lot to do, and it's going to be it's going to take a lot of political acumen to thread the needle on some of these issues, both here internally within the United States and when dealing with his foreign counterparts. We wish him a lot of luck with it, and it should be a fascinating sit-down. Hope you will tune in for that. We'll see you then. The IRS is the largest collection agency in the world, and it just stepped up enforcement for 2025. If you owe back taxes or have unfiled returns, don't wait for the IRS to come to you. Simply avoiding your tax troubles is the worst thing you can do. Getting ahead of this is the smart move, but you might not want to contact the IRS alone. You could turn it over to the team at Tax Network USA. Why? Because not all tax resolution companies are the same. Tax Network USA has a preferred direct line to the IRS, which means they know which agents to deal with and which to avoid. Tax Network USA has proven strategies that are designed to settle your tax problems in your favor, whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million. Their attorneys and negotiators have resolved over $1 billion in tax debt. Speak with one of their strategists for free and stop the threatening letters, stop looking over your shoulder, and put your IRS troubles behind you once and for all. Call 1-800-905-8000 or visit tnusa.com/Megyn. That's tnusa.com/Megyn.